So today we'll be studying about how to create budgets with spreadsheets, right? One of the things that I need you to understand is that a budget is used to help people with their spending, right? We understand what that is, but sometimes it gets a little unwieldy, right? Now, you're going to learn how to create a budget, right? We're going to look at the concept of fixed expenses, variable expenses, and we're going to figure out how much money we actually receive or have left over at the end of the month, right? Now, once your budget has been set, we're going to track the actual spending, and we're going to look at the difference between the budget that you budgeted and what you actually spent. And then we're going to see whether we need to adjust that budget. And by doing that, we're going to be able to better handle our expenses, right? So let's take a look at this example here. Angela is a grade 11 student. She works at a school on weekends at a salon. She makes $645 a month plus tips, so she's clearly working part-time, right? The following are her fixed and variable expenses for each month. So here are her fixed expenses. Here are her variable expenses, right? And here are some tips that she gets usually, right? And then what she actually spends on her variable expenses, right? So the tips that she actually received during that month is going to be $28. Now, by using a spreadsheet, Angela tracked, and we're going to track Angela's budgets by actual spending. Now, the difference between what she budgeted and what she spent is what we're looking for, right? We're going to calculate her totals for what she budgeted and what she actually spent, and her net difference. Now, the key idea is this. Alright, we're only going to do a budget that works right now, but the key idea is this. We're going to sum information today, i.e. we're going to do stuff like this. Equals sum B something to B3, something like that. We'll be doing that on our spreadsheets, and the other thing that we'll need to be able to do is we'll need to subtract different cells. The key idea is if we have for our final, right, if it's positive, then we saved money. If for our final we have negative, then we overspent, and we overspent money for the month. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to use our Google Sheets that we have on the internet, and we're going to use the Google Sheets, and we're going to take all this information and throw it into it, and then we will actually see what our numbers are, right? The most important thing about spreadsheets is that we'll be able to change different things and show different numbers at any time in the month, so we can see what our budget is doing throughout the month. So in order to get to Google Sheets, we have to go to this. We actually have to type inside our Google Chrome, the address window. We're going to type the following: sheets.google.com, and that will give us access to this page, right? Now, once you've got this basic page, what you're going to do is you're going to click create a blank sheet. Now, by creating a blank sheet, what this will allow us to do is it will allow us to take the information that we have here, our fixed expenses, variable expenses, and then use that with the actual numbers that we spent for the month to figure out whether we are overspending or not. Now, the biggest problem is to actually take the time and actually type out that information on our spreadsheet. So let's do that right now. So now the first thing we're going to make sure we understand is how much money is coming into our household, right? So that's what we call income. So remember what she said. She made money at the salon in pay for the month, and she got tips over the month. So now, for our income, right, there are different things that we have here. We have our income, her hair job, right, and then her income with her tips. So now you just need to remember that when we budget a certain amount of money, right, that's what we expect to have happened over the month. Now, you can type that information in, and then what you can do is you're going to click Format as Currency so we can see it as a currency. And at the end of the month, right? So at the end of the month, we go and check to see what our actual numbers are. And we're actually going to put that in later, okay? So right now, our information for our thing says that our budget was $645.65 and the tips budgeted were $25. And that was just for her income. So the next thing we need to consider are the fixed expenses. So let's go and put that information in right now. So based on our budget, we had this information and we just put it into here, into this column. This is what we budgeted. This is what we expect we have to pay each month. Now the next thing that we have to do is we have to enter the variable expenses that we budget. Now remember, all we're going to do is we're just making sure that our information is identical to what we expected for our problem set. Right now, you'll notice that we made sure that this is what we had budgeted, right? Now, we had what our tips were budgeted, we put them in here, we had the amount of money we made, we put it in here, and then these numbers were all our money that we actually made, that we believe we're going to have to pay out at the end of the month, okay? Now, let's go and put down what we actually paid for in this month. Okay, for her income, let's go through and we're going to put in our actual income of $645.45 because that didn't change over that month, right? But if we take a look at what happened in this month for this lady, is she actually made $28 for the month. 28.00. So you'll notice that it's not dollars. Just make sure it's turned into dollars. Now, in order to create the difference formula, here's what you do. You hit the equal sign, and then you click B3. You click the cell where our budgeted amount was, and our actual amount is, and then that subtracts, and that tells us that the difference is $0, right? Now, the best thing about Google is that you can autofill. So you can hit autofill for that next thing, and it'll do the same thing for these two cells. So if you look at the equation, it's actually B4 minus C4. You notice what I did there? I actually clicked on the cell twice, and then it showed me that the formula for the cell is B4 minus C4. Now, we can do that for the rest of these expenses that we actually paid for. So we can see how much we've gone over or under or made. Okay? Now, if you look at this, wait a second. This says the actual money was like, it's minus $3. That doesn't make sense. Oh, geez. You know what we have to do? When we actually do the difference, we actually have to go and hit the actual minus the budgeted expense to figure out how much we're either over or under. So if we actually made more, we'd have a positive number, right? And now to do the same, we're going to do the same thing for this one. So we're going to go actual, which is C4, minus B4. And you hit enter. And so we have a positive of $3 for that month in tips. And so now for our fixed expenses, right? Our fixed expenses are set up in such a way that our fixed expenses don't change, right? But we want to show that the differences are the same. So here's what we do. We're going to hit equals. We're going to go C7 minus B7. You're going to hit equals. And then in order to copy it down, you highlight all the information here and hit Control D to fill the same formula for each one of these lines here. So now that I've got all of those lines, we're going to take the entertainment, the eating out, and all these other things and put them into this column here, which is our actual spending for the month. And we'll see how much money we went over or under. Okay? So now that we have entered all of these variable expenses, let's see what our difference is. So remember, we're going to go equals this number minus this cell. Boom. So it says that we've actually overspent by 35 bucks, and we'll copy that information down. Okay, and you'll notice that for the other ones here, we've underspent a certain amount for each thing. Okay? And basically our difference for each thing is this. Alright? So now your biggest question is, how do we read each of these differences? So for the variable expenses, you'll notice that it was $50 for entertainment, and then we kind of spent 85 bucks. So that means we actually overspent that amount of money. Now, we actually overspent that amount of money. Alright? So we had $3 going in, right? But then we went over our expenses, right? And then that's how we got $35 above our expense, and minus $10 and minus $25 and minus $12 for our expenses. Now that's always really nice. Okay, that kind of tells us that we have the ability to kind of adjust these things, right? In order to make our budgets work properly, we want these to be essentially adding up to zero at the end. But one of the things that we need to understand is what our totals are. So we're going to total our budgeted amount. So our totals for our budgeted amounts is going to be this. All you're going to do is you're going to sum all of your expenses. So we're going to go equals sum, and we're going to go, and we're not going to sum B12, right? We're going to sum the following numbers. We're going to sum everything from this expense all the way down to this expense. Okay? And that tells us we have $594.10 that we have in our budget. And we're going to copy that same information by highlighting the cell, Control C, and then pasting it into our new cell, right? So we budgeted for $594.10, but we underspent. We underspent 580, so we paid out less than before, right? So based on this, if I did the same summation again for all our expenses, boom, we're underspending by a total of $13.58. So we have $13.58 that we can use for extra stuff later on. Okay? Now, the only thing that we didn't do here is we didn't insert a total for our budgeted amount of money. So let's do that. Let's insert 2 rows above, and all we're going to do is we're going to make sure we have a total. And for that total, all we're going to do is we're going to sum the information for our budget. So for our budget, we expect to make $670.45, and then we're going to sum the same thing for the actual, and then we're going to sum the same thing for our difference, as well, to see how much extra we made for the month. So this part tells us, this difference tells us how much extra we have for the month, and when we have our variable expenses, this tells us how much under the budget or over the budget we went when we do our calculations for our expenses. Now, finally, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we understand what our net spending is, right? So the amount of money that we were looking for, remember in this thing, we had to figure out what her total she budgeted and what her net difference is. So if we want to figure out the net for the income and expenses, here's what we want to do. We're literally just going to take the income that we have for the budgeted. So we go here, we click equals, we go this number minus this number, enter. So at the end of each month, we're supposed to have $67.35, right? Okay. Now let's do the same for our actual. So in this case, we're going to do those two numbers. So we have $92.93, and that says that we have a free amount of money that we can use for that month. Okay? All right. And that's it, right? So in this case, for Angelina, Angelina's thing here, right? Angelina has a net difference in her, let's call it expenses, of $92.93. Okay? Now, the only peculiarity is that you do not, for the differences here, what you want to do is you want to take this number and subtract that number, and it'll tell you what your net difference is. But you don't really need to do that for this. You just tell me what the difference in her expenses is, and if I have a positive number, we say that, so her budget is in the positive, which means she hasn't gone over budget. And that's it. Now, if your final net expenses for this month, right, right here, is negative, then you know that you have spent too much money for the month, or you didn't make up enough money, or your variable expenses put you over your budget. All right, and that's it. Now I just want you to go and do the questions that I posted for you.